Las Vegas, 1972. Elvis Presley had just left the stage, sweat still shining under the Hilton lights, when a quiet knock stopped him cold. It wasn't a fan. It wasn't security. It was her, Priscilla, uninvited. The king of rock stood frozen. For once, the man who ruled every crowd couldn't speak. The hallway still shook with noise. 20,000 people chanted his name beyond the thick gold doors of the Hilton showroom. Elvis! Elvis! A rhythm like thunder rolling through the casino floor. Inside the dressing room, the air felt heavier, scented with hairspray, leather, and the faint sting of sweat and cologne. A single bulb flickered above the mirror, casting a halo around the man slumped in his chair. Elvis Presley loosened his white jumpsuit, rhinestones glinting against the dim light. He'd given everything on stage. Every note, every breath. But now his body was still humming with leftover electricity. Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and rhythm guitarist, set down a paper cup of Gatorade. "You killed it tonight, E," Charlie said, voice rough from shouting over the crowd. Elvis smiled weakly. "Yeah. But they don't stop yelling till I leave the building." From somewhere outside, the sound of women crying drifted in real tears, echoing devotion. Fame could sound like worship, but to Elvis tonight, it felt like distance. The clock on the wall ticked past 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes to midnight. He exhaled, reaching for the towel draped over his shoulders. His hand trembled slightly. Lately, it always did after shows. Then 3 soft knocks. Charlie froze. "That Parker again?" Elvis shook his head. "He don't knock that polite." The knocks came again, lighter this time. He nodded toward the door. Charlie opened it halfway and stopped. A woman stood in the hallway, half-shadowed by the neon spill from the casino. Dark hair, pale dress. For a moment, Charlie thought he was seeing a ghost. Priscilla. Her hands clutched a folded Polaroid, edges worn white from years of keeping. She whispered, "Is he alone?" Charlie looked back at Elvis. The king had turned toward the mirror, motionless. For a man worshipped by millions, silence was his only defense. Charlie hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's here." Priscilla walked in slowly, as if afraid the floor might remember their last fight. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing out the roar of the world. Elvis. Just his name. No title, no anger. He didn't answer. He just stared at her reflection in the mirror, the same way he used to watch himself before a show, searching for the man underneath the legend. "You look tired," she said softly. He managed a small laugh. "Tired's been my middle name lately." On the vanity lay a stack of scarves, a Bible, and a half-empty bottle of water. Priscilla's eyes fell on the Bible. She remembered reading from it at Graceland when he couldn't sleep. For a second, the room felt like that house again, before the fame had split them in two. "I shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Then why did you?" "Because you stopped calling. Because Lisa keeps asking why her daddy's always on the TV instead of at home." The words hit like a chord gone wrong. He turned slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time. The man who had conquered every stage now looked small, almost shy. Outside, the crowd began singing the chorus of "Can't Help Falling in Love." The voices seeped through the walls, haunting and tender. Elvis closed his eyes. The song sounded different tonight, like a memory refusing to fade. He opened them again, voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't see me like this, Scylla. I came to see the man, not the show." The room stayed silent, heavy with everything unsaid. The bulb above them flickered once more. Somewhere inside him, a question rose that he couldn't push down. When did I become someone she had to visit uninvited? For a long moment, neither of them moved. The door behind Priscilla clicked shut, and the sound of the crowd faded into a low, distant hum. The king of rock and roll stood in his own dressing room like a stranger on foreign soil. Elvis turned back toward the mirror. The rhinestones across his collar reflected tiny constellations of light, a private galaxy of fame and exhaustion. Priscilla stepped closer, heels barely touching the carpet. She placed the Polaroid on the counter between them. It showed the two of them at Graceland, 1967. He had one arm around her shoulder, laughing, hair windblown. She was in a sundress, holding a bouquet. A perfect snapshot of before. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he stared at his reflection and said quietly, "You still keep that?" "I kept a lot of things," she replied. "Just not the man in that picture." Charlie's voice came muffled from the hall. "You good in there, E?" Elvis answered without turning. "Yeah, Charlie. Give me a minute." The silence that followed was thicker than any applause. Priscilla folded her arms, as if bracing herself. "You know what the papers say, right? That I left because of Hollywood boys. That I wanted the spotlight." He looked at her now, really looked. The makeup couldn't hide the tiredness around her eyes. "You didn't leave for them," he said. "You left because I wasn't home anymore." She nodded, one tear catching the light. "I came tonight because I saw your face on that billboard outside the Hilton. You looked like you were smiling for someone else." He picked up the Polaroid at last, tracing the edge of the photo with his thumb. The skin on his hand shook slightly. "I used to think I could give the world everything," he said. "Turns out I gave it all but myself." Priscilla's eyes softened. "And what's left of you now?" The question lingered in the smoky air. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the wardrobe and pulled out a scarf. A white one with the initials EP embroidered in gold. He had hundreds of them, but this one was different. She had given it to him years ago, back when he still believed small things could last forever. He handed it to her. "You remember this?" She ran her fingers across the fabric. "I remember sewing it myself because the stores didn't have gold thread fine enough." He smiled faintly, a flicker of warmth under the fatigue. "You always did things your way." Then he sighed. "I thought coming to Vegas would save me. New audience every night. Lights bright enough to blind the loneliness." Her voice cracked. "And did it?" He shook his head. "You can't outsing silence, Scylla." The line hung in the air, heavy and final. From the corner table, a radio hissed softly, catching the tail end of a news broadcast. The announcer mentioned his sold-out run, 8 shows straight. The legend was alive on paper, but in the room, only a man remained. Priscilla sat down on the edge of the vanity. "I'm not here to fix you," she said. "I just wanted to see if there's still a heartbeat behind the poster." He laughed, short and bitter. "Still beating, just off tempo." She looked at him with something like forgiveness, but also distance. A kind of love that remembered what it used to be. "I never wanted you to be perfect," she whispered. "I just wanted you to stay real." He rubbed his face, then dropped his hands to his lap. "Real doesn't sell tickets." That broke her. "You think this," she motioned around the room, "is what we dreamed about in Memphis?" His eyes lowered. "Dreams get expensive." For a moment, neither of them breathed. The old clock ticked on. Then she stood, picking up her purse. "Maybe I shouldn't have come." But she didn't move toward the door. "Not yet." Elvis reached for the Polaroid again and tucked it gently into her hand. "Keep it. I don't need reminders of who I was." He met her eyes. There was no stage between them now. No cameras. Just two people who used to know every corner of each other's hearts. "You think anyone would listen?" he asked. "I think you need to." Those words hit deeper than applause ever could. He nodded slowly, almost as if making a promise. Then he took off the golden rings from his fingers, one by one. They clinked softly against the table. Next came the cape. He let it fall over the chair like shedding a skin. "Who are you now?" she asked quietly. He smiled, eyes wet. "Just Elvis. The one you met before the world started shouting." She stepped forward and rested her hand on his cheek. "Then that's enough." The air seemed lighter. Even the walls, once heavy with tension, felt like they were breathing again. He reached for the recorder and pressed stop. The reels slowed to a halt, the tape inside glimmering with the sound of a man rediscovering his own voice. "Keep that one safe," he said. "That's the first honest song I've sung in years." Priscilla nodded. "I will." For a while they just sat in silence, no tension now, just calm. The kind that comes when two people finally run out of lies to tell each other. The lights dimmed slightly as the hotel staff began shutting down for the night. Somewhere a vacuum roared. He looked toward the door. "You heading home?" She smiled softly. "Home's wherever Lisa's waiting. You should visit." He nodded. "Maybe I will." But even she could tell he wasn't sure. When she left for the last time that night, he didn't stop her. He just watched, whispering a line meant only for himself. "If she ever asks, tell her Daddy sang again." The door closed gently. He rewound the tape once more, pressed play, and listened. The room filled with his own voice. Cracked, human, unpolished. And for the first time in years it sounded true. He leaned back, eyes closed, whispering into the dark. Maybe that's enough. Outside, dawn was already touching the Vegas skyline. And for once, the king felt small in a way that didn't hurt. Weeks passed. The Las Vegas run ended. The headlines moved on, and the world spun faster than ever. But somewhere deep in the Hilton archives, inside a plain cardboard box marked Show Tapes, September 1972, one reel stayed hidden. It was the same one from that night, the private recording Elvis had made when no one was supposed to listen. The sound engineer, Bill Porter, had found it while cleaning up. He'd worked with Elvis years earlier in Nashville. When he saw the label Priscilla, written in fading marker, he hesitated before sliding it into the player. The tape hissed, then came that voice. Not the polished superstar the world knew. Not the man who filled stadiums. Just Elvis. Raw, unfiltered, human. He was humming Amazing Grace, low and steady, the guitar slightly out of tune. The first few bars cracked like a confession. Then came silence. After a moment, his voice returned, softer, speaking instead of singing. "Priscilla," he said. "So she remembers who I was before the noise." Bill sat frozen. The room felt smaller, as if time itself was holding its breath. When the song ended, he rewound it once more, just to make sure he'd really heard it. He had. He slipped the reel into his jacket and carried it home that night, unsure if he should keep it or destroy it. It wasn't meant for the world. It was meant for love. But secrets have their own rhythm. Decades later, long after Elvis was gone, Bill's son found the tape among his father's things. The label had faded completely by then, but the handwriting was still there, gentle and looping. He played it once on an old deck, the tape hissing like a whisper from the past. The moment Elvis's voice filled the room, the son said, "Dad, who is this?" Bill smiled sadly. Someone the world thought they already knew. The recording leaked quietly into fan circles online, surfacing on message boards and collector forums. People argued whether it was real. Some said the voice was too fragile, too human. Others said that's exactly why it had to be him. Eventually, it was confirmed by someone who had been there, a sound technician who recognized the static hum from the Hilton system. The tape was real. The video upload was simple. No title cards, no edits. Just the raw audio, labeled Elvis, the Lost Gospel Tape, 1972. Within a week, it reached millions. Listeners across the world described it the same way. "It doesn't sound like Elvis the legend. It sounds like Elvis the man." A fan named Maria posted, "He's not singing to us. He's singing to her. You can hear the love even through the pain." And maybe that was the truth. That one hidden song, recorded in silence, became the most honest thing he ever left behind. When Priscilla heard it years later, she refused to talk about how it surfaced. But close friends said she wept. She kept a copy on cassette in her home, labeled in her handwriting, Hilton, 1972, his last real song. It was the sound of closure disguised as melody, a confession wrapped in a prayer. Some people chase applause their whole lives. Others leave behind something quieter, a moment of truth that outlives the noise. And that tape, that forgotten reel spinning in the dark, carried his truth farther than any concert ever could. 50 years later, the Hilton showroom still stands, now renamed, remodeled, reborn. But if you walk down the service corridor behind the stage, one small brass plate remains screwed into the plaster. It reads, Elvis Presley dressing room, 1972. Tour guides rarely mention it. Most fans never notice. Yet every August, a few leave flowers on the floor beneath that plaque. White lilies, a nod to the scarf she once carried. Inside Graceland's meditation garden, the air hums with cicadas. Visitors whisper instead of speak. They point at the eternal flame, and someone always says the same thing. He was more than the king, wasn't he? Priscilla still visits quietly each year. She never stays long. Just enough time to brush her hand across the marble, to murmur a line no one else can hear. In 2023, a fan caught a glimpse of her leaving a small tape cassette on the stone. The label read, Hilton, Priscilla. No press, no statement. Just silence. That night, social media flooded with old photos. The Polaroid, the scarf, grainy stills from the bootleg tape. People wrote memories they'd inherited from parents or grandparents who'd seen him live. One post read, "He sang for us, but he saved his last song for her." Another said, "Maybe the greatest legends aren't built on what they say on stage, but on what they whisper when no one's listening." And that was the truth the dressing room night had carved into history. The king the world worshipped was only half the story. The other half, the man, the father, the voice cracked with regret, was what endured. Tourists still line up at Graceland's gates. They take photos of the mansion, the pink Cadillac, the stage costumes. But if you listen past the chatter, you can almost hear something softer beneath it all. A faint hum, a fragment of amazing grace leaking through time. Maybe it's imagination. Maybe it's memory. Either way, it feels real. Because some silences never fade. They just change shape. In a museum case near the exit, under dim light, sits a single Polaroid, Elvis and Priscilla in 1967. The caption reads, "The beginning of forever." Beneath it, a handwritten note in her script. He kept his promise. He found his song again. Crowds stop and stare. Some smile, some cry. For a moment, every visitor seems to understand something unspoken, that behind every legend is a heartbeat trying to be heard. And somewhere, maybe in that same desert city where it all unfolded, a faint tape hiss still carries the sound of a man rediscovering himself. Elvis Presley's voice doesn't echo because of fame. It echoes because, in one fragile night in 1972, he remembered who he was when the lights went out. So when you hear his songs now, when Can't Help Falling in Love plays over a grocery speaker, or Suspicious Minds drifts from an old car radio, listen closer. Beneath the music, beneath the myth, there's still that quiet breath between notes. The one that says, Priscilla, and that breath, more than any encore, became his legacy. If you felt this story, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Because sometimes legends aren't built from the roar of the crowd, but from a single moment of silence. Tell us, where were you the first time you heard Elvis sing Amazing Grace? Your memory keeps the man behind the myth alive. She stared at him. Maybe you do. Their eyes met one last time. An echo of the couple who once thought forever was simple. Outside, the crowd started chanting again. But this time, he didn't listen. As she turned to leave, the Polaroid slipped from her grip and fluttered to the floor. Neither of them picked it up. It lay there, between them, like a promise neither could keep. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway, but the silence she left behind clung to the air like smoke. Elvis leaned forward in his chair, staring at the floor where the Polaroid still rested. It felt like a mirror turned backward in time. He picked it up carefully, brushing a thumb across the fading colors. The image carried him away back to the start. Germany, 1960. Snow outside the army base. A young soldier named Elvis Presley walked into a party arranged by his captain. There she was, a 14-year-old girl with dark eyes and shy laughter. Her name was Priscilla Beaulieu. He played a few chords on a borrowed guitar. She laughed, and a friendship began that neither of them understood yet. He had promised to write every week. And somehow he did. Letters filled with doodles, jokes, and lines like, "I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know I want you there." When he came home to Memphis, fame had grown wild around him. Records, crowds, headlines, it was all noise. But in that noise, her letters were quiet. And that's why he loved them. By 1967, the fairy tale took form. A Graceland wedding. White lace, pink roses, flashbulbs so bright they could burn memory itself. The world saw the perfect couple. Only they knew how much of it was rehearsed. In those early years, home smelled like pancakes and perfume. He'd sing gospel in his pajamas. Lisa Marie asleep upstairs, and Priscilla would tease him. "You sing even when no one's listening." He'd grin and say, "That's when it matters most." But something changed. Tour schedules grew longer. The studio lights got hotter. The laughter in Graceland halls began to echo instead of fill. Colonel Parker wanted Elvis to be everywhere: movies, stages, television specials. Each success pulled him farther from home, until love became another appointment on the calendar. In the quiet nights, he'd walk the halls of Graceland alone, still hearing her voice in his head. "Don't forget who you are when the music stops." Sometimes he'd stop by the nursery, touch Lisa's crib, and whisper, "Daddy's just got one more show." But one more always turned into 10. A flash of memory, April 1970. In the kitchen. She had said, "You're turning into someone I don't recognize." He had laughed then, trying to make light of it. "Baby, I'm still me." But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. The fame that once felt like freedom had started to feel like chains, golden, heavy, and impossible to remove. Back in the Hilton dressing room, the echoes of those years pressed against him. He realized that Priscilla's visit wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about history catching up. Every choice, every concert, every missed dinner. It all led here. He whispered to the empty room, "I thought Graceland would keep us safe." The words dissolved into the air, barely audible. He turned to the mirror again. The reflection staring back wasn't Elvis the icon. It was the boy from Tupelo, the one who sang gospel before he learned fame had a price. He pressed his palms to the table. "What do you do?" he thought. "When the song stops sounding like you?" The room had no answer. Then, a faint sound. Someone outside humming a tune. One of the stagehands, maybe. It was "Can't Help Falling in Love." The melody slipped through the door like a ghost of his own making. He closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. The past wasn't gone, it was looping, replaying, begging for closure. The Polaroid lay on the counter again, its edges curling under the heat of the lights. It looked fragile, but maybe that was the point. Some memories aren't meant to fade. They just wait for the courage to face them again. The clock struck midnight. A long crackle of static hummed from the radio. Then nothing. Elvis sat alone in the dressing room, the mirror reflecting a man who looked older than the one the audience had screamed for just an hour ago. He reached for the phone, halfway meaning to call Priscilla back, but stopped. What would he even say? The crowd outside had faded. The Hilton halls were empty except for the distant hum of vacuum cleaners and slot machines. The show was over, but the noise in his head kept playing. He remembered the look in her eyes when she said, "Lisa keeps asking for you." Those words hit harder than any critic ever could. He stood up, pacing. The sequins on his jumpsuit rattled softly. Tiny reminders of the armor he'd built to protect himself from being ordinary. He poured a glass of water. His hands shook again. The liquid rippled in rhythm with his breath. Then another sound. The door creaked open. Charlie Hodge peeked in. "You all right, E?" Elvis nodded, but the lie came too quickly. "Yeah. Just winding down." Charlie studied him for a moment. "You don't gotta be Superman all the time, you know?" Elvis half smiled. "Don't tell the Colonel." Charlie chuckled softly and left, closing the door with care. And then pure silence. Elvis leaned against the wall, letting the stillness fill his lungs. He had sung to millions, yet in this tiny room, not a soul could hear him. He picked up a notebook from the counter. Inside were scribbled lyrics, half-finished. "Take me back to the quiet fields, where nobody knows my name." He had written that line 2 nights ago. Maybe it wasn't about escape. Maybe it was a prayer. His eyes drifted to the scarf Priscilla had left behind. White with gold thread, faint perfume still clinging to it. He pressed it to his chest. "She always knew when I was pretending." he whispered. The silence began to hum again. Not noise, but memory. He saw Lisa's face the last time he'd held her. She was 5. She had said, "Sing, Daddy." He did, quietly, in the hallway until she fell asleep. Now that voice echoed in his mind, smaller, distant. He looked around. The trophies, the posters, the custom guitar leaning in the corner, they all seemed to belong to someone else. He sank onto the couch. The vinyl creaked. The scarf slipped from his hands to the floor. A single tear followed it down. He wiped it away quickly, as if even now someone might be watching. The air felt heavy, charged, waiting for something. He whispered into it, "God, if you're listening, tell me who I am when the music stops." No answer came, but he felt something shift. A calm, a release, as if the silence itself was answering in its own way, "You're still you." He reached for the Bible on the table, the one Priscilla had once read from. The pages were worn at Psalms. He flipped it open and let his eyes fall on the verse. "Be still, and know that I am God." He exhaled slowly. "Be still," he murmured. "That's the hard part." Then came a soft knock. Different this time, hesitant, careful. It was one of the stage techs, a kid named Danny. "Mr. Presley," he said, peeking in. "The lights crew left a tape rolling from your encore. You want me to save it?" Elvis looked up. "Yeah, save it." He paused. "Bring me the recorder too." Danny nodded and disappeared. Elvis sat there thinking about that tape. About sound. About silence. Maybe he could fill this one with something that actually mattered. He picked up his guitar from its stand. The strings were slightly out of tune. Perfect. He strummed once, rough, unpolished, honest. For a moment, the room came alive again. Not with applause, but with truth. He closed his eyes and began to hum a melody no one had heard before. It was soft, broken, full of longing. No band, no crowd, no lights. Just a man, a voice, and a prayer wrapped in music. Outside the door, Danny stopped and listened. He didn't move, didn't dare interrupt. Because somehow, everyone who heard it knew, this was not another performance. It was a confession. The tape rolled. A faint red light blinked from the recorder, and the reel began to spin, catching the sound of a single guitar note trembling in the quiet. Elvis sat hunched over the instrument, eyes half closed, voice low. No microphone, no echo chamber, just him whisper singing the only prayer he knew. Music. Outside the door, Danny listened for a few seconds, then quietly walked away. He knew something sacred was happening inside. Elvis sang the first verse of Amazing Grace. His tone cracked, soft but steady, each line floating in the air like dust in the spotlight. He wasn't performing. He was remembering. Halfway through the song, the door opened again. Priscilla stepped back in. She must have waited in the hallway all this time. He didn't look up, just kept singing. She stood near the wall.